They thought I would stay silent when my sister-in-law kissed my husband at my own birthday party in front of 40 guests. They expected me to smile and pretend nothing happened when my family told me to keep the peace for the sake of our relationships. But what they never anticipated was the phone call I would receive 3 weeks later that would transform me from the woman who was told to stay quiet into someone the Secret Service addresses as Madam. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Victoria Sterling, and at 35 years old, I had built what most people would consider a successful life. I worked as a senior policy analyst for a prestigious consulting firm in Washington, D.C., specializing in international trade relations and economic development strategy. My expertise in global market analysis had earned me recognition within professional circles, though my work often operated behind the scenes, away from public attention. I held a master's degree in international economics from Georgetown University, and had spent the previous 8 years developing comprehensive policy recommendations for government agencies and multinational corporations. The irony of my professional success was that while I analyzed complex global relationships and navigated intricate political dynamics for a living, I had never applied that same analytical rigor to the relationships within my own family. I had spent years overlooking warning signs, making excuses for inappropriate behavior, and prioritizing family harmony over personal boundaries. This pattern of accommodation would prove to be both my greatest weakness and ultimately the catalyst for my transformation into someone I had never imagined I could become. My husband, David Sterling, was a successful architect who specialized in sustainable building design for government facilities. We had been married for 6 years, having met during a professional conference where his firm was presenting environmental impact assessments for federal construction projects. David possessed the kind of steady, reliable personality that complemented my more analytical and sometimes intense approach to problem solving. He understood the demands of my career and had always been supportive of my professional ambitions, even when they required extensive travel or long hours dedicated to complex research projects. Our marriage had been built on mutual respect and shared values, particularly our commitment to integrity and professional excellence. David's work on government projects required security clearances and adherence to strict ethical standards, while my policy analysis demanded objectivity and careful attention to detail. We both understood the importance of maintaining professional reputations in Washington, where personal conduct and public perception could significantly impact career advancement and professional opportunity. Our home in Arlington, Virginia, reflected our professional success and shared aesthetic preferences. The townhouse featured clean lines, natural materials, and an open floor plan that accommodated both David's architectural sensibilities and my need for organized workspace. I had converted one of the upstairs bedrooms into a home office where I could conduct research and prepare policy briefs during evenings and weekends. The space was meticulously organized, with filing systems for various international trade agreements, economic development reports, and correspondence with government officials and corporate executives. My family dynamics had always been complicated, though I had spent years minimizing the significance of these challenges. My younger brother Marcus was 29 years old and worked in digital marketing for a technology startup in Baltimore. Marcus had always been the family favorite, blessed with natural charisma and an easygoing personality that made him popular in social situations. Our parents, Robert and Linda Hartwell, had consistently treated Marcus with a level of indulgence that bordered on enabling his less responsible behaviors. Our parents lived in the same suburban Maryland home where Marcus and I had grown up. Robert worked as a middle manager for a telecommunications company and had held the same position for nearly 15 years. Linda taught elementary school part-time and spent most of her energy managing family relationships and organizing social gatherings. Both parents had always prioritized family unity above individual accountability, often asking family members to overlook problematic behavior rather than addressing conflicts directly. Marcus had been dating Stephanie Chen for approximately 18 months when the events of this story began. They had met through mutual friends at a networking event for young professionals in the Baltimore area. Stephanie worked as a marketing coordinator for a mid-sized consulting firm, and possessed the kind of outgoing, attention-seeking personality that initially appeared charming but gradually revealed itself to be manipulative and self-serving. From my first meeting with Stephanie, I had observed behavioral patterns that concerned me, though I had chosen to keep these observations to myself rather than risk creating family conflict. Stephanie had a tendency to dominate conversations, redirect attention to herself during important moments, and make subtle comments that undermined other people while maintaining plausible deniability about her intention. She was undeniably attractive, with long dark hair, carefully applied makeup, and an extensive wardrobe of designer clothing that she wore even to casual family gatherings. During family dinners and holiday celebrations, Stephanie would consistently find ways to position herself as the center of attention. She would interrupt other people's stories to share her own experiences, offer unsolicited advice about topics she knew little about, and make comments that appeared supportive on the surface but contained subtle criticisms or competitive undertones. Most concerning to me was her behavior around David, which included unnecessary physical contact, flirtatious comments disguised as friendly banter, and attempts to engage him in private conversations during family gatherings. I had mentioned these observations to David on several occasions, but he had dismissed my concerns as overthinking social interactions. David's natural inclination was to assume positive intentions from others, and he interpreted Stephanie's behavior as merely friendly rather than inappropriate. He suggested that my professional experience analyzing complex motivations and hidden agendas might be causing me to read too much into normal social dynamics. The birthday celebration that would change everything was planned for a Saturday evening in October at our Arlington townhouse. I had invited 40 guests, including family members, close friends, and several colleagues from my consulting firm. The guest list represented the various aspects of my life: professional contacts who shared my interest in international economics, college friends who had remained close despite our different career paths, and family members who had been part of my support system throughout my personal and professional development. I had spent considerable time planning the event, coordinating catering from a restaurant that specialized in international cuisine, arranging flowers that reflected the autumn season, and organizing the space to accommodate both intimate conversations and larger group interaction. The celebration was important to me because it represented an opportunity to bring together the different communities that contributed to my sense of identity and accomplishment. David had been actively involved in the party preparations, using his design expertise to create an atmosphere that was both elegant and welcoming. He had arranged lighting that highlighted the architectural features of our home, while creating comfortable spaces for conversation. He had also coordinated with the catering staff to ensure smooth service throughout the evening, and had prepared a playlist of music that would appeal to our diverse group of guests. The early hours of the party proceeded exactly as I had hoped. Guests were engaging in meaningful conversations, the food and wine were well received, and the atmosphere was relaxed and celebratory. I felt genuinely happy to be surrounded by people who had contributed to my personal and professional growth, and I was particularly pleased that my family seemed to be enjoying themselves and interacting positively with my friends and colleagues. Marcus and Stephanie arrived approximately 1 hour after the party began, which was typical behavior for them. Stephanie was wearing a black cocktail dress that was more formal and attention-grabbing than the attire worn by other guests, along with jewelry and accessories that seemed designed to draw notice rather than complement the overall atmosphere of the gathering. Marcus appeared comfortable and was quickly engaged in conversations with other guests, while Stephanie immediately began circulating through the room in a way that seemed calculated to make impressions rather than build genuine connection. During the first 2 hours of the party, I noticed Stephanie engaging in her typical attention-seeking behaviors, but nothing that seemed particularly problematic or out of character. She dominated conversations with my college friends, offered unsolicited opinions about the catering choices, and made several comments about the decoration and organization of the party that contained subtle suggestions for improvement. I chose to focus on enjoying my guests rather than monitoring Stephanie's behavior, assuming that any social awkwardness would resolve itself naturally as the evening progressed. The turning point came during the moment when David was preparing to make a toast in honor of my birth. Guests had gathered in the living room area, wine glasses in hand, creating an atmosphere of warmth and celebration that represented everything I had hoped the evening would accomplish. David stood near the fireplace, speaking about our shared experiences over the past year and expressing appreciation for the friends and family members who had contributed to our happiness and success. As David concluded his toast and guests began to applaud, Stephanie approached him directly in front of the assembled group. Without any warning or apparent provocation, she placed her hands on David's face and kissed him on the lips in a manner that was unmistakably romantic rather than familiar. The kiss lasted for several seconds while 40 guests watched in stunned silence, creating a moment of shock and embarrassment that seemed to suspend normal social interaction. David immediately stepped back from Stephanie, his face showing a combination of surprise and discomfort that made it clear the kiss had been entirely unwelcome. He looked across the room at me with an expression that conveyed both apology and confusion about how to respond to such an unprecedented breach of social boundaries. The guests remained silent, unsure whether they should pretend the incident had not occurred or address it directly. I felt my face burning with humiliation as I realized that my birthday celebration had been transformed into a public spectacle that would be remembered by my friends and colleagues, not for its warmth and success, but for this moment of inappropriate behavior that I had no role in creating but would inevitably be associated with in their memory. The professional contacts who were present included individuals whose respect and trust were important to my career advancement, and I was acutely aware that this incident would influence their perception of my personal judgment and family dynamic. Stephanie remained standing next to David, showing no signs of embarrassment or regret about her action. In fact, she appeared pleased with the attention and disruption she had created, as if the shocked reactions of the guests validated her success in commanding the spotlight during what was supposed to be my special occasion. Marcus stood across the room looking uncomfortable but made no move to address his girlfriend's behavior or apologize for the disruption she had caused. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The remainder of the party proceeded in an atmosphere of forced normalcy that was painful for everyone involved. Guests attempted to resume conversations and pretend that nothing unusual had occurred, but the earlier warmth and spontaneity of the celebration had been replaced by an undercurrent of awkwardness and speculation. Several guests approached me privately to express their concern and support, but their kindness only emphasized the magnitude of the embarrassment that Stephanie's actions had created. David spent the rest of the evening maintaining physical distance from Stephanie and making obvious efforts to demonstrate his discomfort with her behavior. He remained close to me, participated actively in conversations with our guests, and made several public displays of affection that were clearly intended to reassure both me and our friends about the strength of our marriage. However, the damage to the celebration had already been done, and no amount of recovery efforts could restore the joyful atmosphere we had worked to create. As guests began to leave, several friends and colleagues expressed their shock about Stephanie's behavior and offered support if I needed to discuss the situation further. Their kindness and loyalty meant a great deal to me, but I was also aware that this incident would become part of their permanent impression of my family dynamics and personal circumstance. In professional settings where reputation and perception carry significant weight, such incidents can have lasting consequences that extend far beyond the immediate embarrassment. After the last guest departed and David and I were alone in our home, we had a long conversation about what had occurred and how we should respond. David was clearly upset about Stephanie's actions and concerned about the impact on both our marriage and our professional reputation. He assured me that he had given Stephanie no encouragement for her behavior and that he was completely committed to our relationship and marriage. We decided that we needed to address the situation with Marcus and Stephanie directly, but we also agreed that any response should be measured and focused on preventing future incidents rather than escalating family conflict. Neither of us anticipated that this decision to maintain family relationships despite inappropriate behavior would prove to be exactly the wrong approach for dealing with people who interpreted a combination as permission for continued boundary violation. The phone calls from my parents began the next morning, but their content was not what I had expected or hoped to hear. The phone call from my mother came at 7:30 Sunday morning, barely 12 hours after the last guest had departed from my ruined birthday celebration. I was still processing the events of the previous evening, while attempting to restore our home to its normal state, folding chairs and clearing away the remnants of what should have been a joyful milestone in my life. When Linda Hartwell's name appeared on my phone screen, I expected to receive the support and validation that any reasonable parent would offer their daughter after such a public humiliation. Instead, my mother's first words established a pattern of family response that would prove more devastating than Stephanie's original transgression. "Victoria, we need to discuss what happened last night. Your father and I are very concerned about how you handled the situation with Stephanie, and we think you need to consider the impact your reaction might have on family relationships." I sat down heavily in my kitchen chair, struggling to comprehend how my mother could transform an incident where I was clearly the wronged party into a situation where my response was being questioned. "Mom, Stephanie kissed my husband at my birthday party in front of 40 guests. What exactly about my reaction concerns you?" I didn't create a scene, I didn't throw her out of my house, and I maintained composure throughout the rest of the evening. Linda's response revealed the depth of her commitment to avoiding confrontation regardless of the circumstances or consequence. "Honey, Stephanie had been drinking, and she made a mistake. These things happen at parties, and the important thing is not to let one moment of poor judgment destroy family relationships that we've all worked so hard to build. Your father and I think you should consider reaching out to Marcus and Stephanie to clear the air and move past this incident." The suggestion that I should be the person initiating reconciliation after being publicly humiliated represented such a fundamental misunderstanding of appropriate boundaries that I initially assumed my mother had misunderstood the severity of what had occurred. I spent 20 minutes describing the incident in detail, explaining the professional colleagues who had witnessed the inappropriate behavior, and outlining the impact on both my personal dignity and my reputation within circles where professional conduct and personal character were closely scrutinized. My mother listened to my explanation and then delivered a response that crystallized her priorities with devastating clarity. "Victoria, I understand that you're upset, but you need to think about what's best for the family as a whole. Marcus loves Stephanie, and they're planning to get engaged soon. Do you really want to be the person who creates division and conflict over something that was probably just a momentary lapse in judgment influenced by alcohol?" This conversation marked the beginning of my recognition that my family's definition of maintaining harmony required my consistent sacrifice of personal dignity and appropriate boundary. Linda Hartwell had spent decades managing family dynamics by pressuring the most reasonable family member to accommodate the most problematic behavior, and she expected me to continue fulfilling this role regardless of the personal cost or the appropriateness of the conduct being overlooked. My father's call came 2 hours later, and Robert Hartwell's approach differed only in its attempt to frame accommodation as mature leadership rather than family loyalty. "Victoria, your mother told me about the conversation you had this morning, and I wanted to share some perspective from someone who has managed difficult workplace relationships for many years. Sometimes the strongest person in a situation is the one who takes the initiative to address problems constructively rather than allowing them to escalate into larger conflict." Robert's workplace analogy revealed his complete failure to understand the fundamental difference between professional disagreements requiring diplomatic resolution and personal boundary violations that demanded clear consequences. I attempted to explain that professional mediation skills were inappropriate tools for addressing behavior that would be considered sexual harassment in any workplace environment, but my father remained committed to his framework of conflict avoidance through accommodation. "Dad, if a colleague kissed someone's spouse at a company party, that person would face immediate disciplinary action and possible termination. The appropriate response would not be for the affected parties to initiate reconciliation conversations with the person who violated professional and personal boundaries." Robert's response demonstrated his willingness to minimize serious misconduct in order to avoid the discomfort of holding family members accountable for their actions. "Victoria, family relationships are different from workplace relationships. We don't fire family members, and we don't create permanent divisions over mistakes that can be forgiven and forgotten, with some effort and understanding from everyone involved." The phone call from Marcus came that evening, and his approach combined elements of both parents' strategies, while adding his own layer of emotional manipulation designed to make me feel responsible for his relationship difficult. Marcus had always possessed natural charisma and emotional intelligence that he could deploy strategically when he needed to influence outcomes in his favor, and this conversation represented his most concentrated effort to manipulate my response to Stephanie's behavior. Victoria, I know what Stephanie did was inappropriate, and I've already had a serious conversation with her about respecting boundaries and making better decisions in social situations. She feels terrible about what happened and recognizes that her behavior was completely unacceptable. The thing is, she's been dealing with some personal stress lately, and I think the alcohol combined with some family pressures she's been experiencing contributed to her making such a poor choice. Marcus's explanation followed a familiar pattern of providing context that was designed to generate sympathy for problematic behavior without actually excusing it directly. He acknowledged that Stephanie's actions were inappropriate while simultaneously suggesting that external factors had reduced her responsibility for choosing to engage in conduct that violated fundamental social and moral boundaries. Marcus, regardless of whatever stress Stephanie may be experiencing, kissing my husband at my birthday party was a deliberate choice that demonstrated complete disrespect for my marriage, my dignity, and the comfort of 40 guests who were forced to witness inappropriate behavior. Adult women do not accidentally kiss other people's husbands because they are experiencing stress or consuming alcohol. Marcus shifted his approach when his initial strategy failed to generate the sympathetic response he had anticipated. Look, Victoria, I understand why you're angry, and you have every right to be upset about what happened, but Stephanie is going to be part of our family, and we need to find a way to move forward that doesn't create permanent damage to relationships that are important to all of us. The assumption that Stephanie would automatically become a permanent family member regardless of her behavior represented another example of my family's tendency to accommodate problematic conduct rather than establish appropriate consequences. Marcus was essentially asking me to accept that Stephanie's integration into our family was inevitable, and that my response to her misconduct should be guided by that presumption rather than by appropriate standards for respectful behavior. The conversation continued for 45 minutes, with Marcus employing various emotional appeals and logical arguments designed to convince me that taking a strong stance against Stephanie's behavior would be counterproductive for everyone involved. He suggested that public confrontation would be more embarrassing than private resolution, that holding grudges was harmful to my own emotional well-being, and that demonstrating forgiveness would reflect positively on my character and maturity. Throughout this extended persuasion effort, Marcus never once acknowledged the legitimate impact of Stephanie's behavior on my dignity, my marriage, or my professional reputation. His entire focus remained on minimizing consequences for Stephanie while maximizing pressure on me to accommodate her misconduct in the interest of family harmony. The most revealing moment in our conversation came when Marcus directly stated his expectation for my response. Victoria, I need to know that you're willing to work with me to repair this situation. Stephanie wants to apologize to you personally, and I think we should plan a family dinner where everyone can have an honest conversation and commit to moving forward together. This request encapsulated everything that was problematic about my family's approach to conflict resolution. Marcus wanted me to participate in an orchestrated reconciliation process that would restore social harmony without requiring Stephanie to face meaningful consequences for her behavior. The proposed family dinner would serve to normalize her conduct and establish a precedent that serious boundary violations could be resolved through symbolic gestures rather than genuine accountability. My response to Marcus marked the first time in our adult relationship that I had refused to accommodate his requests in the interest of family peace. Marcus, I will not be participating in any family dinners or reconciliation conversations with Stephanie. Her behavior was completely unacceptable, and I will not pretend otherwise in order to make other people comfortable with inappropriate conduct. The silence that followed my statement lasted nearly 30 seconds, during which I could sense Marcus processing the reality that his usual influence strategies were not producing their intended effect. When he finally responded, his tone had shifted from persuasive to accusatory, revealing the frustration that emerged when his emotional manipulation encountered firm resistance. Victoria, I'm really disappointed that you're choosing to handle this situation in a way that's going to create lasting problems for our entire family. Mom and Dad are already upset about the tension this is creating, and your refusal to even consider reconciliation is going to force everyone to choose sides in a conflict that could be resolved if you were willing to be more flexible. Marcus's threat about forcing family members to choose sides represented a classic manipulation tactic designed to make me feel responsible for consequences that were actually the result of Stephanie's misconduct and the family's inappropriate response to it. He was attempting to reframe my enforcement of reasonable boundaries as the source of family conflict, rather than acknowledging that the problem originated with behavior that violated fundamental standards of respect and appropriate conduct. The conversations with my parents and Marcus continued over the following week, with each family member employing different strategies to pressure me into accommodating Stephanie's behavior and participating in their preferred conflict resolution process. Linda called twice daily to provide updates about Marcus's emotional state and Stephanie's supposed remorse, while Robert sent lengthy emails outlining various compromise approaches that would allow family relationships to continue without anyone having to acknowledge that serious wrongdoing had occurred. These sustained pressure campaigns revealed patterns in my family dynamics that I had never clearly recognized, despite their consistent presence throughout my adult life. My parents and Marcus had developed sophisticated systems for avoiding accountability and maintaining comfortable social dynamics through the strategic manipulation of the most responsible family members. They had learned that I could be reliably pressured into accommodating unreasonable behavior if they framed resistance as selfishness and cooperation as maturity. The breakthrough in my understanding came during a particularly intense phone conversation with my mother, who had escalated her emotional appeals to include predictions about permanent family division and speculation about my motivations for maintaining firm boundaries. Linda suggested that my career success had made me arrogant and that my standards for other people had become unrealistic and unforgiving. Victoria, I'm worried that your professional life has changed your perspective on family relationships in ways that aren't healthy. You've become so focused on rules and standards that you've lost sight of the love and forgiveness that should guide how we treat each other. Stephanie made a mistake, but your response is turning that mistake into a family crisis that could have lasting consequences for all of us. This accusation that my professional competence had somehow damaged my capacity for appropriate family relationships represented such a fundamental misunderstanding of both professional standards and family dynamics that it clarified the scope of the problem I was facing. My mother was essentially arguing that maintaining dignity and enforcing reasonable boundaries were incompatible with healthy family relationships, and that accommodation of inappropriate behavior was a demonstration of love rather than enabling. My response to Linda marked a turning point in my approach to family relationships and my understanding of my own worth and dignity. Mom, my professional experience has taught me the importance of maintaining clear boundaries and holding people accountable for their choices. Those same principles apply to family relationships, and they're especially important when someone's behavior demonstrates complete disrespect for other people's marriages and dignity. The conversation that followed this statement lasted over an hour and covered decades of family dynamics that I had never examined critically. Linda revealed her belief that successful families required someone to consistently sacrifice their own needs in order to maintain harmony, and she had designated me as that person based on my education, professional success, and natural tendency toward responsibility and compromise. This revelation helped me understand that my family's current response to Stephanie's behavior was not an aberration, but rather a continuation of patterns that had shaped our relationships for my entire adult life. I had been consistently expected to accommodate Marcus's irresponsible choices, overlook my parents' favoritism, and prioritize family unity over personal dignity. The birthday party incident had simply made these dynamics visible in a way that could no longer be ignored or rationalized. The week of sustained family pressure concluded with a conference call that included my parents, Marcus, and myself, during which each participant attempted to establish their position and preferred resolution for the ongoing conflict. This conversation represented the clearest articulation of our competing values and priorities, and it marked the moment when I recognized that accommodation would not resolve the underlying problems, but would instead establish precedents for future boundary violations. Robert opened the call by framing the discussion as a family problem-solving session, designed to find solutions that would meet everyone's needs while preserving important relationships. We're all adults here, and we should be able to work together to address this situation in a way that demonstrates maturity and commitment to family values. Marcus followed with a detailed presentation of Stephanie's remorse and his own commitment to ensuring that similar incidents would not occur in the future. Stephanie has learned from this experience, and she's committed to making different choices going forward. I think we can use this as an opportunity to strengthen our family relationships by demonstrating our ability to forgive and move past difficult situations. Linda concluded the opening statements with an emotional appeal that combined expressions of disappointment with predictions about the consequences of continued conflict. Victoria, your father and I have spent 35 years building a close family, and we're heartbroken about the possibility that one incident could destroy all the love and connection we've created together. My response to these coordinated appeals represented the most direct challenge I had ever made to my family's conflict resolution strategies, and the most clear assertion of my own values and boundaries. The words I spoke during that conference call would establish the foundation for everything that would follow in the weeks and months ahead. I will not be apologizing to anyone for refusing to accommodate behavior that was completely inappropriate and disrespectful. I will not be participating in family gatherings that include Stephanie unless and until she demonstrates genuine accountability for her actions and a commitment to respecting appropriate boundaries. And I will not be pretending that kissing my husband at my birthday party was a minor mistake that can be resolved through symbolic gestures and group discussions about forgiveness. The silence that followed this statement marked the end of my role as the family member who could be reliably pressured into sacrificing personal dignity for the comfort of others. The aftermath of my refusal to accommodate my family's reconciliation demands created a profound silence that extended far beyond the conclusion of our conference call. For the first time in my adult life, I experienced complete radio silence from my parents and Marcus, a phenomenon that initially provided relief, but gradually revealed the extent to which I had built my emotional support system around relationships that required my consistent self-sacrifice to maintain their stability. During the 2 weeks following my declaration of boundaries, I received no phone calls, text messages, or emails from any family member. This absence of communication represented such a dramatic departure from our normal interaction patterns that it forced me to examine how much of my identity and emotional security had been tied to my role as the family mediator and problem solver. The quiet in my personal life created space for reflection that had been impossible when I was constantly managing family crises and accommodating unreasonable demands. David observed the change in our household dynamics with a mixture of concern and admiration. He had witnessed my family's manipulation tactics during our 6 years of marriage, but he had never seen me respond with such unwavering commitment to personal boundaries. During our evening conversations, he expressed both support for my decision and worry about the emotional toll that family estrangement might create for me over time. Victoria, I'm proud of you for standing up to them, but I also want to make sure you're taking care of yourself during this transition. You've never been completely cut off from your family before, and I know that has to be difficult regardless of how inappropriate their behavior has been. David's concern was well-founded, but I discovered that the absence of constant family drama actually enhanced my emotional well-being rather than diminishing it. Without the regular stress of managing my mother's emotional manipulation, my father's conflict avoidance strategies, and Marcus's requests for accommodation of increasingly problematic behavior, I experienced a level of mental clarity and emotional stability that I had not realized was possible. This newfound clarity enabled me to focus my energy and attention on professional opportunities that had been relegated to secondary priority while I managed family relationships. The consulting firm where I worked as a senior policy analyst had recently secured several high-profile contracts with federal agencies seeking expertise in international trade policy and economic development strategy. These projects required the kind of deep analytical work and strategic thinking that represented my greatest professional strengths. Dr. Catherine Morrison, the founding partner of our consulting firm, had been attempting to expand our government contracts for several years, but these efforts had been constrained by the firm's limited capacity to dedicate senior-level analysts to the intensive research and policy development that federal agencies require. My availability to take on additional responsibilities came at precisely the moment when these opportunities were reaching critical decision points. Victoria, I've been reviewing the proposals we submitted to the Department of Commerce and the Office of the United States Trade Representative, and both agencies have requested expanded scope of work that would require someone with your expertise to serve as lead analyst. These contracts could represent a significant expansion of our government work, but they would demand complete dedication from whoever takes on the leadership role. Morrison's proposition represented exactly the kind of career advancement opportunity that I had been preparing for throughout my professional development. But previous family obligations had made it impossible for me to commit to the intensive travel and research requirements that federal consulting demanded. The timing of this opportunity during my period of family estrangement felt like validation that my decision to prioritize personal dignity over family harmony had opened pathways that accommodation and conflict avoidance had kept closed. The first major project involved developing comprehensive policy recommendations for strengthening trade relationships with Southeast Asian economies, with particular focus on emerging markets that had not been fully integrated into existing bilateral and multilateral trade frameworks. This assignment required extensive research into economic development patterns, regulatory environments, and political stability factors that would influence long-term trade policy effectiveness. The work demanded exactly the kind of analytical rigor and strategic thinking that had made me successful in my consulting career, but it also required a level of independence and confidence that my family relationships had consistently undermined. Without the constant pressure to accommodate other people's needs and manage relationship conflicts, I found myself capable of the kind of focused, sustained intellectual effort that produces genuinely innovative policy solutions. The research phase of the project required me to conduct interviews with trade officials, economic development specialists, and business leaders across multiple countries and organizations. These conversations provided insights into economic trends and policy opportunities that were not available through traditional research methods, and they also connected me with international networks of professionals who shared my expertise and analytical approach. Louis, the director of trade policy for the Singapore Economic Development Board, became a particularly valuable source of insight into regional economic integration strategies and their potential application to United States trade policy. Our initial interview, which was scheduled for 30 minutes, extended to nearly 2 hours as we discussed innovative approaches to addressing trade barriers and regulatory harmonization challenges. Sterling, your analysis of supply chain resilience factors demonstrates understanding of economic interdependencies that most American policy analysts overlook. The framework you are developing could address fundamental problems that have limited the effectiveness of previous trade initiatives. Dr. Louis' assessment of my work represented the kind of professional validation that I had been seeking throughout my career, but it also highlighted capabilities that I had not fully recognized or developed due to the energy and attention that family relationship management had required. The absence of constant family drama enabled me to operate at a level of professional effectiveness that had been impossible when I was simultaneously managing multiple personal conflicts and emotional manipulation campaigns. The second major project involved analyzing the economic impact of emerging technology sectors on traditional manufacturing and trade patterns. This assignment required collaboration with technology policy experts, manufacturing industry representatives, and economic forecasting specialists to develop comprehensive assessments of how technological innovation would influence international trade relationships over the next decade. This work positioned me at the intersection of technology policy and international economics, two areas where federal agencies were seeking expertise that combined deep analytical capabilities with practical implementation experience. The research revealed significant gaps in current policy frameworks and substantial opportunities for the United States to strengthen its competitive position through strategic investments in technology-enhanced trade infrastructure. The policy recommendations that emerged from these projects represented some of the most comprehensive and innovative work that our consulting firm had ever produced for federal clients. The Department of Commerce implementation team described my analysis as groundbreaking in its integration of economic theory with practical policy applications, and they requested that I serve as the primary consultant for developing implementation strategies for the recommended policy change. James Harrison, the Deputy Secretary for International Trade Policy, personally contacted Dr. Morrison to express the department's satisfaction with my work and to inquire about my availability for additional consulting projects that would require even higher levels of security clearance and government collaboration. Sterling's policy analysis represents exactly the kind of strategic thinking that our trade policy development has been lacking. We would like to discuss expanded consulting arrangements that would give her access to classified economic intelligence and enable her to contribute to policy decisions at the highest levels of government. This conversation marked the beginning of a professional transformation that would ultimately lead to opportunities I had never imagined possible. The quality of my policy work had attracted attention from senior government officials who were seeking consultants capable of handling the most sensitive and strategically important trade policy challenges facing the United States. The security clearance process required for expanded government consulting proved to be remarkably straightforward given my existing professional background and the absence of any personal or financial complications that might create security concerns. My marriage to David, whose architectural work already required security clearances, provided additional validation of my suitability for handling classified information and sensitive policy development work. During this period of professional advancement, the contrast between my family relationships and my professional relationships became increasingly apparent. While my parents and Marcus had demanded that I sacrifice personal dignity and appropriate boundaries to maintain their comfort, my professional colleagues respected my expertise, valued my contributions, and sought my input on decisions that would influence national economic policy. Dr. Elizabeth Carter, the senior economic advisor to the Secretary of Commerce, invited me to participate in a series of high-level briefings where policy recommendations would be presented to cabinet-level officials and congressional leadership. These sessions represented the kind of professional recognition that validated years of education, research, and analytical work, but they also demonstrated the career opportunities that became available when I prioritized professional excellence over family relationship management. Victoria, your trade policy analysis has been instrumental in developing our approach to economic competition with China and other emerging economies. We need someone with your expertise to help translate complex economic research into policy recommendations that can be implemented effectively across multiple government agencies. The invitation to contribute to cabinet-level policy discussions represented a level of professional influence that few consultants ever achieve, but it also required absolute commitment to the analytical rigor and strategic thinking that had distinguished my work from more conventional consulting approaches. This opportunity would have been impossible to pursue while managing the constant family crises and manipulation campaigns that had previously consumed significant portions of my time and emotional energy. The most significant breakthrough came when Dr. Carter recommended me for inclusion in a classified economic intelligence briefing that would inform trade policy decisions related to national security consideration. This recommendation required additional security clearance upgrades and demonstrated the level of trust that senior government officials had developed in my analytical capabilities and professional judgment. The briefing session took place in a secure facility within the Department of Commerce, and it included senior officials from multiple agencies who were responsible for coordinating economic policy with national security objectives. The content of these discussions revealed the extent to which international trade policy intersected with intelligence gathering, diplomatic strategy, and long-term national security planning. During these high-level meetings, I began to understand that my policy analysis work was contributing to decision-making processes that extended far beyond traditional economic consulting. The recommendations I developed were being integrated into comprehensive strategic frameworks that would influence American economic relationships with countries around the world for years to come. Admiral Patricia Reynolds, the Director of Economic Intelligence for the National Security Council, approached me after one particularly intensive briefing session to discuss potential opportunities for expanded collaboration between my consulting firm and various government agencies involved in economic intelligence analysis. "Sterling, your policy work demonstrates exactly the kind of strategic thinking that we need for addressing complex economic security challenges. We have been looking for consultants who can bridge the gap between academic economic analysis and practical intelligence applications, and your work suggests that you have the capabilities we are seeking." Admiral Reynolds' assessment of my professional capabilities represented validation from the highest levels of government that my analytical work was making meaningful contributions to national security policy development. This recognition also suggested that career opportunities existed within government consulting that I had never previously considered or imagined possible. The conversation with Admiral Reynolds concluded with an invitation to participate in an upcoming economic security summit that would bring together senior officials from across the federal government to discuss policy coordination strategies for addressing emerging economic threats and opportunities. This summit would provide opportunities to demonstrate my analytical capabilities to decision-makers who controlled some of the most influential positions in government economic policy. The personal transformation that accompanied these professional development was as significant as the career advancement itself. Without the constant pressure to accommodate family manipulation and manage relationship conflicts, I discovered capabilities and confidence that had been suppressed by years of prioritizing other people's comfort over my own professional and personal development. David observed these changes with admiration and support, but he also recognized that my professional advancement was opening possibilities that could significantly alter our life circumstances and career trajectory. Our evening conversations began to include discussions about potential career moves, geographic relocations, and lifestyle changes that would have been impossible to consider while I was managing constant family drama. "Victoria, watching you work at this level has been incredible. You're operating with a confidence and capability that I always knew you possessed, but that never had space to develop fully while you were dealing with family crises every week. I'm excited to see where these opportunities lead, and I want you to know that I support whatever decisions you make about your career path." The support that David provided during this period of professional transformation contrasted sharply with the manipulation and emotional pressure that my family had employed whenever my success threatened to reduce my availability for managing their problem. This contrast illuminated the difference between relationships that supported personal growth and relationships that required personal sacrifice to maintain their stability. As my professional responsibilities expanded and my government consulting work became more sophisticated, I began to receive invitations to participate in policy discussions that required increasingly advanced security clearances and access to classified information. These opportunities represented career advancement that extended far beyond traditional consulting work and into the realm of direct policy influence at the highest levels of government. The culmination of this professional development phase came with an invitation to attend a classified briefing at the White House, where senior administration officials would be discussing economic policy coordination strategies with a select group of outside consultants and policy experts. This invitation represented the kind of professional recognition that few people ever achieve, and it validated my decision to prioritize personal dignity and professional excellence over family relationship management. The transformation from isolated family member to influential government consultant had occurred within a matter of months, but it represented the culmination of years of professional development that had been constrained by family obligations and relationship management demands. The absence of family drama had not created these opportunities, but it had made it possible for me to recognize and pursue them with the focus and dedication they required. The White House briefing took place on a crisp November morning in the Roosevelt Room, where the assembled group of 12 policy experts and senior consultants represented the highest concentration of economic intelligence expertise that the administration had ever convened for a single strategic planning session. The invitation to participate in this classified discussion represented validation of analytical capabilities that had been recognized and cultivated by multiple government agencies over the preceding months of intensive consulting work. Secretary of Commerce Patricia Williams opened the briefing by outlining the scope of economic security challenges that required immediate policy attention and long-term strategic planning. The international economic landscape had evolved rapidly over the previous 18 months, creating both opportunities for American economic leadership and threats to established trade relationships that demanded sophisticated analytical responses and innovative policy solutions. The economic intelligence we have gathered indicates that several key trading partners are implementing strategic initiatives that could fundamentally alter global trade patterns within the next 24 months. We need policy recommendations that address both immediate competitive challenges and long-term positioning for American economic leadership in emerging markets. The briefing materials provided to participants included classified economic intelligence that revealed the extent to which international trade policy had become integrated with national security considerations and diplomatic strategy. The analysis demonstrated that economic competition had evolved beyond traditional trade relationships to encompass technology transfer, supply chain security, and strategic resource allocation considerations that required comprehensive policy coordination across multiple government agencies. My preparation for this briefing had involved 3 weeks of intensive research and analysis that built upon the policy frameworks I had developed during previous consulting projects. The recommendations I brought to the discussion addressed specific gaps in current policy approaches while proposing innovative strategies for strengthening American economic competitiveness without compromising existing diplomatic relationships or trade commitments. The policy framework I presented during the briefing focused on leveraging emerging technology sectors to create competitive advantages in international trade relationships. This approach combined traditional economic analysis with strategic assessments of technological innovation patterns and their potential impact on global supply chains and manufacturing capabilities. Michael Chang, the National Security Council's Senior Director for International Economics, responded to my presentation with questions that revealed the depth of government interest in the strategic implications of my policy recommendation. His inquiries focused on implementation timelines, resource requirements, and potential coordination challenges that would need to be addressed to translate analytical insights into effective policy actions. Sterling, your analysis of technology-enhanced trade infrastructure presents opportunities that could significantly strengthen our economic position, but implementation would require coordination between agencies that have not traditionally collaborated on economic policy initiatives. How would you recommend approaching the institutional challenges involved in executing these strategies? The question demonstrated that senior officials were considering my recommendations not merely as theoretical policy options but as practical initiatives that could be implemented with appropriate planning and resource allocation. This level of serious consideration for my analytical work represented professional recognition that extended far beyond traditional consulting relationships and into the realm of direct policy influence. My response outlined a phased implementation approach that would begin with pilot programs designed to test the effectiveness of proposed strategies while building institutional capacity for broader policy coordination. This framework addressed practical concerns about bureaucratic complexity while maintaining focus on the strategic objectives that made comprehensive policy reform necessary for maintaining American economic competitiveness. The discussion that followed my presentation involved
involved detailed examination of economic intelligence data and strategic assessments that revealed the sophisticated analytical capabilities that government agencies brought to international economic policy development. The quality of analysis and the depth of strategic thinking demonstrated by senior officials provided insight into the level of expertise that was required for meaningful contribution to policy discussions at this level. Admiral Sarah Mitchell, the Director of Economic Security Analysis, contributed perspectives that connected my trade policy recommendations with broader national security considerations and intelligence assessment framework. Her analysis demonstrated how economic policy decisions could influence diplomatic relationships, alliance structures, and strategic positioning in ways that extended far beyond immediate trade and economic outcomes. The policy framework that Sterling has developed aligns with our strategic assessment of economic competition patterns and provides opportunities for strengthening our position in key geographic regions. Implementation of these recommendations could enhance both our economic competitiveness and our strategic influence in ways that address multiple national security objectives simultaneously. Admiral Mitchell's endorsement of my policy work represented validation from the highest levels of government economic security analysis, but it also suggested that my consulting work was being evaluated for potential applications that extended beyond traditional economic policy into areas that required even more advanced security clearances and government collaboration. The briefing concluded with assignments for follow-up analysis and policy development work that would inform major economic policy decisions expected to be announced within the following quarter. My assignment involved leading a comprehensive assessment of implementation strategies for technology-enhanced trade initiatives, with particular focus on coordination mechanisms that would enable effective collaboration between previously independent government agencies. This assignment represented a significant expansion of my government consulting responsibilities and positioned me as a primary analyst for policy initiatives that would influence American economic relationships with countries around the world. The scope of work required dedicated focus and analytical capabilities that would have been impossible to provide while managing the family relationship conflicts and manipulation campaigns that had previously consumed substantial portions of my time and emotional energy. Catherine Morrison expressed both pride and concern when I briefed her about the expanded government consulting opportunities that had emerged from the White House meeting. The level of government collaboration being requested represented career advancement that would establish our consulting firm as a primary resource for senior-level economic policy development. But it also required commitments that would fundamentally alter the nature of my professional responsibilities. Victoria, the opportunities you have created through your analytical work represent exactly the kind of government collaboration that we have been working toward for years. However, the level of security clearance and government integration being requested suggest that you are being considered for roles that extend beyond traditional consulting into direct policy implementation support. Dr. Morrison's assessment proved to be accurate when I received a call from Dr. Jennifer Walsh, the Deputy National Security Advisor for Economic Affairs, requesting a private meeting to discuss potential opportunities for expanded government collaboration that would require even more advanced security clearances and direct participation in classified policy development processes. The meeting with Dr. Walsh took place in a secure conference facility within the Executive Office building, where our conversation covered career opportunities that I had never previously considered or imagined possible. The government positions being discussed would involve direct participation in policy development at the highest levels of administration, decision-making, with responsibilities that extended far beyond traditional consulting into areas of strategic planning and policy coordination. Sterling, your analytical work has demonstrated exactly the kind of strategic thinking and practical policy development capabilities that we need for addressing the most complex economic security challenges facing the administration.
We would like to discuss opportunities for you to contribute to policy development in ways that would require full-time government service and access to the highest levels of classified information. The proposition that Dr. Walsh outlined involved transitioning from external consulting to direct government employment in a senior policy development role that would require Senate confirmation and extensive background investigation. This opportunity represented career advancement that would position me among the most influential economic policy analysts in government, while providing access to classified intelligence and strategic planning processes that few people ever experience. The decision about whether to pursue direct government employment required careful consideration of both professional opportunities and personal circumstances. The proposed position would provide unprecedented influence over economic policy development and access to intelligence analysis capabilities that could enhance my understanding of international economic relationships in ways that traditional consulting work could never achieve. However, the transition to government employment would also require significant lifestyle changes and personal sacrifices that needed to be discussed thoroughly with David before making any commitments. The security requirements and travel demands associated with senior government positions could substantially alter our marriage dynamics and living arrangements in ways that required mutual agreement and careful planning. David's response to my discussion of potential government employment opportunities reflected both admiration for my professional achievements and willingness to support career decisions that could significantly impact our shared circumstances. His perspective demonstrated the kind of partnership support that enabled major life transitions and career advancement in ways that family manipulation and emotional pressure had consistently prevented. Victoria, watching you operate at this level has been incredible, and I want you to pursue whatever opportunities align with your professional goals and personal value. If direct government service represents the best use of your capabilities and provides the kind of work satisfaction you are seeking, then we will find ways to make the practical arrangements work regardless of the challenges involved. The contrast between David's supportive response to opportunities and my family's history of attempting to manipulate me into accommodating their preferences illustrated the fundamental difference between relationships that facilitated personal growth and relationships that required personal sacrifice to maintain stability. This contrast provided additional motivation for pursuing professional opportunities that would validate my decision to prioritize personal dignity over family harmony. The background investigation process required for senior government employment proved to be remarkably thorough, but straightforward, given my existing security clearances and the absence of personal or financial complications that might create security concern. The investigation included extensive interviews with professional colleagues, academic references, and personal acquaintances who could provide assessments of my character, judgment, and suitability for handling classified information and sensitive policy responsibility. One aspect of the background investigation that initially caused concern involved the requirement to provide detailed information about family relationships and potential sources of personal pressure or manipulation that could compromise professional judgment or create security vulnerability. The estrangement from my parents and Marcus required careful explanation to demonstrate that family conflicts would not influence my policy analysis or create opportunities for external pressure on my decision-making. Special Agent Robert Chen, who conducted the primary security interview, demonstrated sophisticated understanding of family dynamics and their potential impact on professional responsibility. His questions about my family relationships focused on my ability to maintain professional objectivity and resist personal pressure, rather than on the appropriateness of my decision to establish boundaries with family members who had demanded inappropriate accommodation. Sterling, your decision to maintain professional boundaries despite family pressure suggests exactly the kind of judgment and integrity that we require for senior policy positions. The ability to prioritize professional responsibilities over personal relationships when necessary is essential for handling classified information and participating in sensitive policy development processes. Agent Chen's assessment of my family situation as evidence of professional strength rather than personal weakness provided validation that my boundary-setting decisions had been appropriate and demonstrated character traits that were valued in government service. This perspective contrasted sharply with my family's characterization of my decisions as selfish and destructive to important relationships. The completion of the security clearance upgrade process coincided with formal notification that the senior economic policy position had been approved for offering, contingent upon my acceptance and successful completion of the confirmation process. The position would involve serving as Senior Director for International Economic Strategy within the National Security Council, with responsibilities for coordinating economic policy across multiple government agencies and providing strategic analysis for presidential decision-making. The opportunity to serve in this capacity represented the culmination of analytical work and policy development expertise that had been cultivated over years of professional development, but it also validated my decision to prioritize professional excellence over family relationship management. The career advancement had been made possible by the focus and dedication that became available when I stopped accommodating family manipulation and emotional pressure. Walsh contacted me personally to extend the formal offer and to discuss the timeline for transition from consulting work to direct government employment. Her call included expressions of confidence in my analytical capabilities and recognition of the professional achievements that had led to this opportunity for direct policy influence at the highest levels of government. Ms. Sterling, your acceptance of this position would represent a significant enhancement of our economic policy development capabilities and would position you to contribute to strategic decisions that will influence American economic relationships for years to come. We believe that your analytical expertise and strategic thinking abilities are exactly what we need for addressing the complex economic security challenges facing the administration. The formal offer included compensation and benefits that reflected the seniority of the position while also providing access to professional development opportunities and intelligence analysis resources that were unavailable in private sector consulting work. The package demonstrated government recognition of the value of my analytical capabilities and commitment to providing the support necessary for effective policy development and strategic planning. My decision to accept the position represented more than career advancement. It constituted validation of my choice to prioritize personal dignity and professional excellence over family accommodation and relationship management. The transformation from someone who was expected to sacrifice personal boundaries for family harmony into someone who was trusted with senior-level policy responsibilities at the White House demonstrated the opportunities that became available when I refused to accept limitations imposed by other people's expectations and demands. The notification process for accepting the government position required careful coordination with Dr. Morrison and other professional colleagues to ensure smooth transition of consulting responsibilities while maintaining confidentiality about the specific nature of my new government role. The security requirements associated with the position limited the extent to which details could be shared even with close professional associates. The personal satisfaction derived from achieving this level of professional recognition extended beyond career advancement to include validation, analytical capabilities, and strategic thinking skills that had been developed despite family relationships that consistently demanded accommodation of problematic behavior rather than pursuit of professional excellence. The success demonstrated that prioritizing personal growth and professional development over relationship management had enabled achievements that would have been impossible while accommodating family manipulation. The timeline for beginning government service included several weeks of orientation and briefing sessions that would provide access to classified intelligence analysis and strategic planning processes that informed economic policy development at the highest level. This preparation period would establish the foundation for contributing effectively to policy discussions and strategic planning initiatives that influenced American economic relationships around the world. The transformation from isolated family member to senior government policy analyst had required less than 6 months, but it represented the culmination of professional development that had been constrained for years by family obligations and relationship management demands. The achievement validated my decision to establish appropriate boundaries and demonstrated the career opportunities that became available when personal dignity was prioritized over family harmony. The first indication that my family had discovered the magnitude of my professional transformation came through an unexpected phone call from my cousin Rebecca, who worked as a journalist for the Washington Herald and maintained connections throughout the political establishment in the capital region. Rebecca had not contacted me since the birthday party incident, but her tone during our conversation revealed both shock at my career advancement and concern about the implications for family relationships that had been damaged by months of mutual silence. Victoria, I cannot believe what I am hearing through my professional contacts about your new position at the White House. When colleagues started mentioning your name in connection with senior economic policy roles, I initially assumed they were referring to someone else entirely. I had no idea that you were being considered for positions at this level of government service. Rebecca's call provided insight into how my professional advancement had become visible within Washington political circles, despite my efforts to maintain confidentiality during the transition process. The senior director position within the National Security Council represented the type of appointment that generated attention from journalists, policy analysts, and other government officials who tracked personnel changes in key policy development roles. The conversation with Rebecca also revealed that news of my appointment had reached members of my extended family through professional networks and media coverage, creating awareness of my career advancement among relatives who had previously viewed me as the family member responsible for maintaining harmony through personal accommodation rather than pursuing independent professional success. Victoria, I have to ask you directly about the situation with your parents and Marcus. From what I understand through family conversations, there has been some kind of ongoing conflict that has prevented normal communication for several months. Given the prominence of your new government position, I think everyone needs to understand how family relationships might be affected by your increased public profile. Rebecca's inquiry demonstrated that my professional advancement had created circumstances where family estrangement could no longer be maintained as a private matter without potential consequences for relatives who shared my surname and might be subject to media attention or professional scrutiny based on their connection to my government role. The security briefing I had received regarding media attention and public profile management had included specific guidance about maintaining appropriate boundaries with family members who might attempt to leverage personal relationships for professional or financial advantage. The protocols required careful documentation of any attempts by relatives to influence my policy work or access classified information through personal connection. My response to Rebecca established clear boundaries, while acknowledging the legitimate concerns about family relationships that had been raised by my increased public visibility. Rebecca, my professional responsibilities require me to maintain appropriate boundaries with all personal relationships, including family members. Any discussions about family matters would need to occur independently of my government service and without any connection to my professional responsibility. This conversation marked the beginning of a sustained campaign by various family members to re-establish contact and repair relationships that had been damaged by their previous demands for accommodation of inappropriate behavior. The timing of these reconciliation attempts immediately following my professional advancement suggested that family members were motivated more by potential access to government influence than by genuine concern for personal relationships. The first direct contact from my immediate family came through a carefully worded email from my father, Robert Hartwell, who attempted to frame his outreach as concern for my well-being rather than interest in my professional advancement. The message demonstrated sophisticated understanding of the need to avoid any appearance of attempting to influence my government responsibilities while still establishing communication channels that could potentially be developed into more extensive relationship repair. Victoria, your mother and I have been thinking about you frequently over the past several months, and we wanted to reach out to express our pride in your professional achievements and our hope that family relationships can be repaired regardless of the disagreements that have created distance between us. We recognize that your new responsibilities require careful attention to appropriate boundaries, and we want to respect those requirements while exploring possibilities for rebuilding personal connection. Robert's email represented a significant departure from the family's previous approach to conflict resolution, which had consistently involved bans for my accommodation of problematic behavior rather than acknowledgement of legitimate boundaries or respect for my professional responsibility. The change in tone suggested recognition that my increased public profile and government position had altered the dynamics of our relationships in ways that required different strategies for communication and interaction. However, the timing of this outreach immediately following my appointment to a senior government position raised questions about the motivations underlying the reconciliation attempt. The security training I had received included specific warnings about family members who might attempt to exploit personal relationships for access to classified information, government influence, or professional advancement opportunities. My response to Robert's email maintained professional boundaries while acknowledging his expression of interest in relationship repair. I appreciate your outreach and your recognition of the boundaries required by my professional responsibility. Any discussions about family relationships would need to occur independently of my government service and would require genuine acknowledgement of the issues that led to our estrangement. The communication from my father was followed within 48 hours by a much more emotional and manipulative message from my mother, Linda Hartwell, who employed familiar guilt-inducing language while attempting to incorporate references to my professional success into her appeals for family reconciliation. Victoria, I am so proud of what you have accomplished professionally, and I want you to know that your father and I have always believed in your capabilities, even when we disagreed about how to handle difficult family situations. I hope that your success has given you perspective on the importance of family relationships and the value of forgiveness in maintaining connections that have been built over decades of shared experience. Linda's message revealed her continued commitment to reframing the family conflict as a disagreement about approaches rather than acknowledgement of inappropriate behavior that had required clear boundaries and consequences. Her attempt to suggest that my professional success should enhance my appreciation for family relationships demonstrated fundamental misunderstanding of how boundary violations had damaged trust and respect within our relationship. The most concerning aspect of Linda's communication was her subtle implication that my professional advancement validated the importance of maintaining family connections, regardless of behavioral issues. This suggestion revealed continued commitment to the manipulation tactics that had characterized our relationships for years and indicated that genuine acknowledgement of problematic behavior remained unlikely despite changed circumstances. My response to Linda maintained the same boundaries that I had established with Robert while declining to engage with the emotional manipulation embedded in her message. I acknowledge your expression of pride in my professional achievement. However, family relationship discussions would require genuine acknowledgement of the behavioral issues that led to our estrangement, and such conversations would need to occur independently of my government responsibility. The most dramatic reconciliation attempt came from Marcus, who employed a combination of emotional appeals, professional recognition, and veiled threats about potential consequences of continued family estrangement. His message demonstrated sophisticated understanding of the political environment in Washington and suggested that he had researched the potential implications of family conflicts for government officials in prominent positions. Victoria, I want to congratulate you on your incredible professional achievement and to express my sincere regret about the family conflicts that have prevented us from celebrating your success together. I recognize that Stephanie's behavior at your birthday party was completely inappropriate, and I want to discuss how we can address that situation in ways that allow our family to move forward together. Marcus's acknowledgement of Stephanie's inappropriate behavior represented the first time any family member had directly validated my assessment of the birthday party incident, without attempting to minimize its significance or shift responsibility to my response. This change suggested recognition that continued denial of the problem would be counterproductive for re-establishing family relationships, given my increased public profile and professional responsibility. However, Marcus's message also included subtle references to the challenges that family estrangement could create for government officials and the benefits that supportive family relationships could provide for individuals in prominent public positions. These comments suggested that his reconciliation efforts were motivated partly by understanding of how family conflicts could complicate my professional responsibilities,
rather than genuine remorse about previous behavior. Victoria, I know that people in your position benefit from having supportive family relationships that provide stability and perspective during challenging professional circumstances. I hope we can work together to rebuild the trust and connection that would allow our family to be a source of strength rather than stress as you navigate your new responsibility. The implication that family relationships should be repaired to serve my professional interest rather than to address legitimate behavioral concerns revealed continued commitment to manipulation tactics that prioritized family harmony over accountability for inappropriate conduct. Marcus was essentially offering family support in exchange for overlooking the boundary violations that had created our estrangement. My response to Marcus required careful consideration of both personal boundaries and professional security requirements. I acknowledge your recognition that Stephanie's behavior was inappropriate. However, meaningful relationship repair would require comprehensive acknowledgement of the manipulation tactics that have characterized our family dynamics and genuine commitment to respecting appropriate boundaries going forward. The coordinated nature of these reconciliation attempts suggested that family members had discussed strategy for reestablishing contact and had agreed on approaches that acknowledged my professional advancement while attempting to minimize the significance of the behavioral issues that had led to our estrangement. This coordination reinforced my assessment that their motivations were primarily opportunistic rather than genuinely focused on relationship repair. The security protocol briefing I had received included specific guidance about documenting attempts by family members or other personal contacts to influence my professional responsibilities or access classified information. The timing and content of the reconciliation attempts required careful documentation to ensure compliance with security requirements and to protect both my clearance status and my ability to perform my government responsibilities effectively. Jennifer Walsh, my supervisor within the National Security Council, provided guidance about managing family reconciliation attempts during the sensitive period following appointment to senior government position. Her advice emphasized the importance of maintaining clear boundaries while avoiding actions that could be characterized as unnecessarily hostile toward family members who had not attempted to compromise classified information or government responsibility. Sterling, the situation you have described with family members attempting reconciliation of following your appointment is unfortunately common for officials in prominent positions. The key is maintaining clear documentation of all contacts while avoiding engagement that could create security vulnerabilities or compromise your professional objectivity. Walsh's guidance included specific recommendations for responding to family reconciliation attempts in ways that maintained appropriate boundaries without creating additional conflict that could attract unwanted media attention or complicate my professional responsibility. The approach required careful balance between personal dignity and professional discretion. The most sophisticated reconciliation attempt came through an indirect channel when Catherine Morrison received a call from Marcus, who claimed to be seeking advice about how to repair family relationships that had been damaged by misunderstandings about professional boundaries and family expectations. His contact with my former consulting supervisor demonstrated concerning willingness to involve my professional associates in family relationship management efforts. Morrison handled Marcus's outreach with professional discretion, while immediately notifying me about the contact and providing detailed documentation of the conversation for security reporting purposes. Her response demonstrated the kind of professional support that enabled effective boundary maintenance while ensuring compliance with government security requirements. Victoria, your brother contacted me to discuss what he characterized as family relationship challenges that might be affecting your professional satisfaction. I provided no information about your work or circumstances, but I wanted you to be aware of this contact immediately given your current security responsibilities. Marcus's attempt to involve my professional associates in family reconciliation efforts represented escalation of manipulation tactics that raised concerns about his understanding of appropriate boundaries and his willingness to respect the security requirements associated with my government position. This behavior required formal documentation and consideration of whether additional security measures might be necessary to protect classified information and government responsibilities. The cumulative effect of these coordinated reconciliation attempts was to demonstrate that my family members remained committed to manipulation tactics and opportunistic relationship management rather than genuine acknowledgement of behavioral issues or respect for appropriate boundaries. Their responses to my professional advancement validated my decision to maintain estrangement rather than suggesting that meaningful relationship repair was possible. The contrast between family manipulation attempts and the professional respect and support I received from government colleagues reinforced my understanding of the fundamental differences between relationships that facilitated personal growth and relationships that required personal sacrifice to maintain stability. The recognition and validation I received through my government service provided additional motivation for maintaining boundaries that protected both my professional responsibilities. The documentation requirements associated with family reconciliation attempts also served as objective validation of the manipulation tactics that had characterized our relationships for years. The need to report and analyze these interactions through professional security protocols provided external verification of behavioral patterns that I had previously questioned or minimized in the interest of family harmony. The family's discovery of my professional advancement had created exactly the kind of opportunistic reconciliation attempts that demonstrated continued commitment to manipulation rather than genuine relationship repair. Their responses validated my decision to prioritize personal dignity and professional excellence over accommodation of inappropriate behavior and family pressure to maintain harmony through personal sacrifice. The escalation in my family's reconciliation efforts reached a critical threshold when Marcus and Stephanie appeared unannounced at my Arlington house on a Saturday morning in December, 3 weeks after my official start date in the White House position. Their arrival represented a significant breach of the boundaries I had established and demonstrated complete disregard for the security protocols that governed my personal residence due to my classified government responsibility. The doorbell rang at 8:15 while David and I were having breakfast and reviewing materials for a policy briefing scheduled for the following Monday. The sight of Marcus and Stephanie through our front window created immediate concern about both personal safety and security compliance. As unannounced visits from family members required documentation and potential notification of security personnel depending on the circumstances and duration of the interaction. David answered the door while I prepared to contact the appropriate security office if the situation appeared to involve any attempts to access classified information or compromise my professional responsibility. The conversation that I could overhear from our kitchen revealed that Marcus had come prepared with sophisticated arguments about family reconciliation and professional considerations that demonstrated extensive research into my current position and its requirements. David, we know that Victoria has important responsibilities now, and we want to respect the boundaries those responsibilities require. However, we also believe that some of the family conflicts that developed earlier this year may have been based on misunderstandings that can be resolved through honest conversation and mutual respect for everyone's perspectives and needs. Marcus's approach represented a significant departure from previous manipulation tactics that had relied primarily on emotional appeals and guilt-inducing pressure. His current strategy acknowledged my professional advancement while attempting to reframe previous boundary violations as misunderstandings that could be resolved through improved communication rather than genuine behavioral change or accountability for inappropriate conduct. I joined David at the front door to address Marcus Marcus and Stephanie directly while maintaining the security awareness and documentation requirements that governed interactions with personal contacts who had not been cleared for access to my residence during my tenure in government service. The conversation that followed would prove to be the most direct confrontation I had ever had with family members about behavioral expectations and relationship boundaries.
Marcus, your unannounced arrival at my residence violates the boundaries I established months ago and creates security concerns related to my government responsibilities. If you want to discuss family relationships, that conversation needs to occur through scheduled communication that respects both personal boundaries and professional requirements. Marcus appeared surprised by the directness of my response and the reference to security concerns that had not been part of our previous family relationship dynamics. His reaction suggested that he had not fully understood the implications of my government position for our personal interactions, and had assumed that family relationships would continue to operate according to previous patterns, despite my professional advancement. Victoria, I did not realize that your new position created restrictions on family visits. We came here because we wanted to have an honest conversation about repairing our relationships, and we thought face-to-face discussion would be more effective than continued email exchanges that do not seem to be leading toward resolution. The assumption that my professional responsibility represented obstacles to family reconciliation, rather than legitimate requirements that needed to be respected, revealed continued commitment to manipulation, tactics that prioritized family member convenience over appropriate boundaries and professional obligations. Marcus was essentially arguing that my government duties should be subordinated to family relationship management, rather than understanding that personal relationships needed to adapt to professional requirements. Stephanie remained silent during the initial exchange, but her presence at my residence represented particular concern given her history of inappropriate behavior and boundary violation. The decision to accompany Marcus to my home suggested either lack of understanding about the severity of previous misconduct or deliberate disregard for the consequences that her actions had created for family relationships. My response to Marcus established clear expectations while providing specific information about the documentation and security requirements that governed personal interactions during my government service. Marcus, my professional responsibilities require documentation of unannounced visits from family members and notification of security personnel if such visits involve attempts to discuss government activities or access restricted information. The mention of security documentation appeared to create genuine concern for Marcus, who had not anticipated that family relationship conflicts could have implications for government security protocols or create potential complications for relatives who might be subject to background investigation or security review based on their connection to my professional responsibility. Victoria, we have no interest in your government work or any classified information. We are here specifically to discuss personal relationships and the possibility of repairing family connections that have been damaged by conflicts that we believe can be resolved through mutual understanding and commitment to improved communication. Marcus's clarification demonstrated awareness that attempts to access government information could create serious legal and security consequences, but his continued presence at my residence despite my clear statement about boundary violations suggested persistent commitment to manipulation tactics that prioritized his objectives over my legitimate requirements for appropriate personal and professional boundaries. The conversation continued for approximately 30 minutes, during which Marcus employed various strategies designed to generate sympathy for family reconciliation, while minimizing the significance of behavioral issues that had led to our estrangement. His approach included emotional appeals about family unity, practical arguments about the benefits of supportive relationships for government officials, and subtle threats about potential consequences of continued family conflict. Victoria, I understand that you feel strongly about maintaining boundaries, but I hope you also recognize that family relationships provide stability and emotional support that can be particularly valuable for people in high-pressure professional positions. Isolation from family during stressful circumstances can create personal difficulties that ultimately affect professional performance. The suggestion that family estrangement could compromise my professional effectiveness represented a sophisticated manipulation tactic that attempted to leverage my commitment to government service in support of relationship reconciliation that would require accommodation of inappropriate behavior. Marcus was essentially arguing that my professional responsibilities created obligations to maintain family relationships regardless of behavioral concerns or boundary violation. My response addressed both the manipulation tactic and the underlying assumptions about family relationships and professional effectiveness. Marcus, my professional performance has improved significantly since I established boundaries with family members who demanded accommodation of inappropriate behavior. The stability and support that effective professional relationships provide far exceed any benefits that could be derived from personal relationships that require sacrifice of dignity and appropriate boundaries. This statement represented the most direct articulation I had ever provided about the relationship between family dynamics and professional effectiveness. The acknowledgement that family estrangement had enhanced rather than diminished my career advancement contradicted fundamental assumptions that Marcus had made about the importance of family relationships for personal and professional success. Stephanie finally spoke during the concluding portion of our conversation, and her comments revealed continued commitment to the attention-seeking and boundary-violating behavior that had created our original conflict. Her approach combined expressions of remorse with attempts to minimize the significance of her actions and deflect responsibility for the consequences that her behavior had created. Victoria, I want you to know that I have learned from the mistakes I made at your birthday party, and I am committed to making better choices in social situations going forward. I hope that we can find ways to rebuild trust and move past conflicts that have created unnecessary stress for everyone involved in our family relationship. The characterization of her inappropriate behavior as mistakes rather than deliberate choices revealed continued lack of genuine accountability for boundary violations that had demonstrated complete disrespect for my marriage and personal dignity. Stephanie's attempt to frame the consequences as unnecessary stress rather than appropriate responses to misconduct suggested persistent commitment to manipulation tactics that avoided genuine responsibility for behavioral change. My response to Stephanie established clear expectations for any future interaction, while documenting her continued failure to demonstrate genuine understanding of the behavioral issues that had created our conflict. Stephanie, your characterization of kissing my husband as a mistake suggests continued lack of understanding about appropriate boundaries and personal responsibility. Any future family relationships would require genuine accountability for behavioral choices, rather than attempts to minimize their significance or deflect responsibility for their consequences. The conversation concluded with my clear statement that unannounced visits would not be tolerated, and that any future communication needed to occur through scheduled channels that respected both personal boundaries and professional security requirements. Marcus and Stephanie departed after acknowledging these expectations, but their body language and final comments suggested continued commitment to reconciliation efforts, rather than acceptance of the boundaries that had been established. The documentation requirements associated with the unannounced visit included detailed reporting to security personnel about the nature of the interaction, the topics discussed, and any attempts to access information related to my government responsibility. This documentation process provided objective validation of the manipulation tactics that family members continued to employ, despite clear statements about appropriate boundaries and professional requirements. Jennifer Walsh reviewed the incident report and provided guidance about managing ongoing family pressure while maintaining security compliance and professional effectiveness. Her response demonstrated sophisticated understanding of the challenges that government officials faced when personal relationships conflicted with professional requirements and security obligations. Sterling, the behavior you have described suggests that your family members may continue to test boundaries despite clear communication about security requirements and personal expectations. The documentation you have provided will be important for ensuring continued clearance eligibility and professional effectiveness if these interactions escalate or involve additional security concerns. Walsh's assessment confirmed that my family's behavior represented legitimate security and professional concerns, rather than normal relationship conflicts that could be resolved through improved communication or compromise. Her guidance reinforced my understanding that maintaining firm boundaries was necessary for both personal dignity and professional effectiveness. The incident also provided additional evidence that my family members remained committed to manipulation tactics that prioritized their preferences over legitimate boundaries and professional requirements. Their willingness to violate clearly established expectations about unannounced visits demonstrated continued disregard for consequences and persistent belief that emotional pressure could overcome rational boundary setting. The contrast between my family's manipulation attempts and professional respect and support I received from government colleagues continued to reinforce my understanding of the fundamental differences between relationships that facilitated personal growth and relationships that required personal sacrifice to maintain stability. The security and professional frameworks that governed my government service provided objective standards for evaluating the appropriateness of personal relationship dynamics. David's observation of the interaction with Marcus and Stephanie provided additional perspective on the manipulation tactics that family members employed and the effectiveness of the boundary-setting approaches I had developed. His support for maintaining firm expectations despite family pressure demonstrated the kind of partnership that enabled effective personal and professional development. Victoria, watching you handle that conversation was impressive. You maintained professional composure while establishing clear expectations, and you did not allow them to manipulate you into compromising the boundaries that have been essential for your personal and professional success. Their behavior confirmed that your decision to maintain distance was appropriate and necessary. David's assessment validated my approach to family relationship management while providing additional motivation for continued commitment to boundary maintenance despite ongoing pressure and manipulation. His perspective demonstrated the importance of supportive partnerships in enabling effective resistance to family manipulation and emotional pressure tactics. The unannounced visit from Marcus and Stephanie marked a turning point in my understanding of family dynamics and the effectiveness of boundary-setting strategies. Their continued commitment to manipulation despite clear communication about professional requirements and personal expectations demonstrated that genuine relationship repair remained impossible while they maintained attitudes that prioritized their convenience over appropriate boundaries and respectful behavior. The incident also provided additional evidence that my professional advancement had been achieved through personal development that required distance from family relationships that had consistently undermined my confidence and capability. The security requirements and professional standards that governed my government service created objective frameworks for evaluating relationship dynamics and maintaining appropriate boundaries. The documentation and reporting requirements associated with family interactions during government service provided external validation of manipulation tactics that I had previously questioned or minimized in the interest of family harmony. The need to analyze these interactions through professional security protocols confirmed that my assessment of problematic behavior had been accurate and that boundary setting had been necessary for both personal and professional effectiveness. The successful management of this direct confrontation demonstrated personal growth and professional development that had been enabled by prioritizing dignity and appropriate boundaries over family accommodation and emotional manipulation. The incident confirmed that continued family estrangement was necessary for maintaining the personal and professional effectiveness that had led to unprecedented career advancement and government service opportunity. The weeks following the unannounced visit from Marcus and Stephanie brought a period of intensive focus on my government responsibility, during which my analytical capabilities and strategic planning skills were tested through increasingly complex policy challenges that required coordination across multiple federal agencies. The economic intelligence briefings I attended revealed sophisticated threats to American economic interests that demanded immediate policy responses and long-term strategic planning initiatives. My role as Senior Director for International Economic Strategy positioned me at the center of policy development processes that influenced trade relationships, diplomatic negotiations, and national security considerations across multiple geographic regions and economic sectors. The classified intelligence reports I reviewed provided insights into foreign government economic strategies, corporate espionage activities, and emerging market developments that could significantly impact American economic competitiveness and strategic positioning. Doc Jennifer Walsh assigned me to lead a comprehensive assessment of economic security vulnerabilities in critical supply chain with particular emphasis on identifying potential disruption scenarios and developing mitigation strategies that would protect American economic interests while maintaining existing trade relationships and diplomatic commitment. This assignment required collaboration with intelligence agencies, military strategic planning units, and private sector experts who possessed specialized knowledge about global supply chain dynamics. The policy framework I developed through this analysis identified several categories of economic security threats that required immediate attention from senior administration officials and congressional leadership. The recommendations included both defensive measures designed to protect existing economic advantages and offensive strategies that could enhance American competitive positioning in emerging technology sectors and developing markets. Admiral Patricia Reynolds, who served as Director of Economic Intelligence for the National Security Council, provided strategic guidance about the intelligence implications of my policy recommendations and their potential impact on ongoing diplomatic negotiations and intelligence collection activity. Her perspective demonstrated the sophisticated integration of economic analysis with national security planning that characterized policy development at the highest levels of government. Sterling, your assessment of supply chain vulnerabilities has identified economic security risks that align with intelligence indicators we have been monitoring through multiple collection systems. The policy recommendations you have developed provide strategic options that could significantly enhance our economic security posture while creating opportunities for improved intelligence collection and diplomatic leverage. Admiral Reynolds's endorsement of my analytical work represented validation from the highest levels of economic intelligence analysis, but it also positioned me for involvement in policy discussions that extended far beyond traditional economic consulting into areas that required even more advanced security clearances and direct participation in strategic planning processes that influenced national security decision-making. The expansion of my responsibilities coincided with increased media attention, focused on personnel changes within the National Security Council and the policy implications of recent appointments to senior economic strategy positions. Several prominent political journalists had identified my appointment as indicative of the administration's commitment to more aggressive economic competitiveness strategies and enhanced coordination between economic policy and national security plans. The Washington Herald published a detailed analysis of recent National Security Council appointments that included extensive discussion of my background, professional qualifications, and potential influence on economic policy development. The article described my transition from private sector consulting to senior government service as evidence of the administration's commitment to recruiting analytical talent from outside traditional government career paths. The appointment of Victoria Sterling to the position of Senior Director for International Economic Strategy represents a significant enhancement of the National Security Council's analytical capabilities and strategic planning resources. Sterling's background in international trade policy and economic development analysis provides expertise that has been notably absent from previous administration economic policy teams. The media coverage of my appointment created awareness of my professional advancement among extended family members and personal acquaintances who had not been informed about my government service through direct communication. This publicity generated additional contact attempts from relatives and former colleagues who sought to re-establish relationships or explore opportunities for professional collaboration based on my increased influence and government access. The security protocols governing my position required careful documentation of all contact attempts from personal acquaintances and professional associates who might seek to leverage our relationships for access to classified information or government influence. The media attention surrounding my appointment created particular concern about individuals who might attempt to exploit personal connections for commercial or political advantage. Rebecca, my journalist cousin, contacted me again to discuss the implications of the media coverage for family relationships and to provide information about additional reconciliation attempts that other family members were considering based on their increased awareness of my professional prominence and government influence.
Victoria, the media coverage of your appointment has created significant discussion within our extended family about the situation with your parents and Mark. Several relatives have expressed concern about the family conflicts and their potential impact on your professional responsibilities or public reputation. Rebecca's information revealed that my professional advancement had generated family discussions about reputation management and damage control strategies rather than genuine concern about relationship repair or behavioral accountability. The focus on potential professional complications suggested that family members remained primarily motivated by self-interest rather than authentic commitment to addressing the behavioral issues that had created our estrangement. The most concerning development came through Rebecca's report that Linda and Robert Hartwell had consulted with a family attorney about potential strategies for compelling family reconciliation or accessing information about my government responsibilities through legal channels. This consultation suggested escalation of manipulation tactics beyond emotional pressure to include potential legal threats designed to force compliance with family expectations. Victoria, I want you to be aware that your parents have been discussing options for addressing what they characterize as family estrangement that could create professional complications for someone in your position. They seem to believe that government officials have obligations to maintain family relationships or risk security clearance problems. The fundamental mental misunderstanding about security clearance requirements and family relationship obligations revealed the extent to which my parents remained committed to manipulation tactics while lacking accurate information about government employment requirements and professional responsibility. Their willingness to consult legal counsel suggested desperation about their inability to influence my decisions through traditional emotional pressure tactics. My response to Rebecca provided accurate information about security requirements while establishing clear documentation of family threats and manipulation attempts. Rebecca, government security clearances are based on individual trustworthiness and professional judgment rather than family relationship status. Attempts to use legal pressure to compel family reconciliation would actually raise security concerns about family members who might attempt to compromise professional responsibilities through personal manipulation. The conversation with Rebecca also revealed that Marcus and Stephanie had been encouraging my parents to pursue legal consultation as a strategy for forcing family reconciliation. Their involvement in escalating manipulation tactics, to include potential legal threats, demonstrated continued commitment to boundary violations and refusal to accept the consequences of their inappropriate behavior. The information about potential legal threats required immediate documentation and consultation with security personnel about appropriate protective measures and response strategy. The Security Office provided guidance about managing family pressure tactics that could escalate to include legal harassment or attempts to compromise professional responsibilities through personal relationship manipulation. Special Agent Robert Chen, who had conducted my security clearance investigation, provided additional perspective about family manipulation tactics and their potential impact on government service and clearance eligibility. His guidance emphasized the importance of maintaining detailed documentation while avoiding engagement that could provide family members with additional opportunities for manipulation or legal harassment. Sterling, the behavior you have described from family members represents exactly the kind of personal pressure and manipulation that security clearance evaluation processes are designed to identify and assess. Your consistent boundary setting and professional prioritization demonstrate the kind of judgment and integrity that supports continued clearance eligibility and effective government service. Agent Chen's assessment provided additional validation that my family relationship management strategies were appropriate for government service and demonstrated character traits that were valued in classified work environments. His perspective reinforced my understanding that accommodation of family manipulation would compromise rather than enhance my professional effectiveness and security clearance status. The escalation of family pressure tactics coincided with a significant expansion of my government responsibilities when Dr. Walsh assigned me to serve as the administration's primary liaison for economic policy coordination with International Intelligence Service. This appointment required additional security clearances and positioned me for direct participation in intelligence sharing agreements and diplomatic negotiations that influenced global economic relations. The new responsibilities included regular communication with economic intelligence officials from allied governments and participation in classified briefings that informed joint strategic planning initiatives designed to address shared economic security threats and competitive challenges. This work required the highest levels of analytical capability and professional judgment while providing opportunities to influence international economic policy at unprecedented levels. Director Sarah Mitchell of the Central Intelligence Agency's Economic Analysis Division provided orientation about the intelligence sharing protocols and analytical standards that governed international economic intelligence cooperation. Her briefing emphasized the strategic importance of the liaison role and the potential for economic intelligence coordination to enhance both American competitive positioning and allied relationship management. Sterling, the economic intelligence sharing agreements you will be managing represent critical components of our strategic relationship management with key allies. Your analytical capabilities and policy development expertise provide exactly the combination of skills needed for effective coordination of economic intelligence activities and strategic planning initiatives. Director Mitchell's assessment positioned me among the most influential policy analysts in government, while providing access to intelligence resources and international collaboration opportunities that enhanced my analytical capabilities and strategic understanding of global economic relations. The appointment represented career advancement that extended far beyond traditional consulting work into direct influence over international economic policy and intelligence coordination. The expansion of my international responsibilities created additional security requirements and communication protocols that further limited my availability for personal relationship management and family conflict resolution. The classified nature of my work required careful separation between professional activities and personal relationships to ensure compliance with intelligence sharing agreements and diplomatic confidentiality requirements. The timing of this professional advancement coincided with the most aggressive family reconciliation campaign that my parents and Marcus had ever undertaken. Their awareness of my increased prominence and international responsibilities appeared to motivate desperate attempts to reestablish family relationships through escalating pressure tactics that included emotional manipulation, legal threats, and attempts to involve extended family members in reconciliation efforts. Linda Hartwell contacted several of my professional colleagues and former university professors to express concern about family estrangement and to request assistance with compelling reconciliation. These contacts represented significant boundary violations and demonstrated complete disregard for professional requirements and appropriate relationship management strategies. Dr. Catherine Morrison received multiple calls from Linda requesting meetings to discuss what she characterized as family conflicts that were affecting my emotional well-being and professional effectiveness. Linda's attempts to involve my former consulting supervisor in family relationship management represented escalation of manipulation tactics that raised serious concerns about her willingness to respect appropriate boundaries and professional requirements. Victoria, your mother has contacted me several times requesting meetings to discuss family relationships and their potential impact on your professional responsibility. I have declined these meetings and documented the contacts for your awareness, but I wanted you to understand the extent of the outreach efforts that family members are making to your professional associates. Dr. Morrison's professional handling of my mother's inappropriate contact attempts demonstrated the kind of supportive leadership that enabled effective boundary maintenance while ensuring compliance with security requirements and professional standards. Her documentation of the contacts provided additional evidence of family manipulation tactics that could be relevant for security assessment and professional protection measures. The cumulative effect of these escalating family pressure campaigns was to demonstrate that my parents and Marcus remained fundamentally committed to manipulation tactics rather than genuine relationship repair or behavioral accountability. Their willingness to involve legal counsel, Contact my professional associates and violate clearly established boundaries, confirmed that a combination would not resolve the underlying problems but would instead validate and encourage additional manipulation.
The professional advancement and international responsibilities that had resulted from my commitment to personal boundaries and analytical excellence provided both motivation and resources for maintaining firm expectations despite escalating family pressure. The security frameworks and professional support systems that governed my government service created objective standards for evaluating family behavior and maintaining appropriate relationship boundaries. The contrast between family manipulation tactics and professional respect continued to reinforce my understanding that prioritizing personal dignity and professional excellence over family accommodation had enabled achievements that would have been impossible while managing constant emotional pressure and boundary violations. The transformation from family mediator to senior government official validated my decision to establish appropriate boundaries, regardless of family resistance or manipulation campaigns. The intelligence briefing that would fundamentally alter my professional responsibilities and personal circumstances arrived on a Monday morning in January through a secure communication system that required the highest levels of security clearance and government authorization. The classified intelligence report outlined emerging economic threats that demanded immediate policy response and strategic coordination across multiple federal agencies and international intelligence partnership. Director Sarah Mitchell of the Central Intelligence Agency personally delivered the briefing, which detailed sophisticated economic espionage activities targeting American technology sectors and trade policy development processes. The intelligence revealed coordinated efforts by foreign governments to compromise economic policy decision-making through infiltration of government consulting networks and manipulation of policy development personnel through personal relationship exploitation. The scope of the economic espionage activities described in the intelligence report extended far beyond traditional corporate espionage to include systematic attempts to influence American economic policy through targeted recruitment of government officials, consultants, and their family members. The intelligence indicated that foreign operatives had developed comprehensive profiles of senior economic policy personnel and were actively attempting to exploit personal relationships and family dynamics to gain access to classified information and policy development process. Director Mitchell's presentation emphasized the strategic importance of protecting economic policy development from foreign influence operations, while maintaining the analytical capabilities and international cooperation that enabled effective policy coordination. The intelligence sharing agreements that governed my liaison responsibilities required enhanced security protocols and additional protective measures that would significantly impact my professional activities and personal relationship management. Sterling, the intelligence we have gathered indicates that your position as Senior Director for International Economic Strategy has made you a high-priority target for foreign intelligence services seeking to compromise American economic policy development. The liaison responsibilities you have assumed for international economic intelligence coordination place you at the center of information flows that foreign operatives are actively attempting to access through various recruitment and influence strategies. Director Mitchell's assessment positioned my government service within a broader context of national security protection that extended beyond traditional policy analysis to include direct involvement in counterintelligence activities and security protection measures. The classification of my position as a high-priority target for foreign intelligence services required immediate implementation of enhanced security protocols that would fundamentally alter my personal and professional circumstances. The security enhancement process began with comprehensive threat assessment and vulnerability analysis that examined all aspects of my personal relationships, professional association, and family dynamics to identify potential exploitation opportunities that foreign operatives might attempt to leverage for intelligence collection or policy influence activities. This analysis required detailed documentation of family conflicts, manipulation attempts, and boundary violations that could create security vulnerabilities or compromise my professional effectiveness. Special Agent Rebecca Torres, who served as the lead counterintelligence analyst for economic policy protection, conducted extensive interviews about family relationship dynamics and their potential impact on security compliance and professional vulnerability assessment. Her evaluation focused on identifying manipulation tactics and pressure strategies that foreign operatives might attempt to exploit through family members or personal associates. Sterling, the family pressure campaigns and manipulation attempts you have documented demonstrate exactly the kind of personal vulnerabilities that foreign intelligence services target for exploitation. Your consistent boundary setting and refusal to accommodate inappropriate behavior indicate strong resistance to manipulation tactics, but the escalating pressure from family members creates ongoing security concerns that require enhanced protective measures. Agent Torres's assessment confirmed that my family's manipulation tactics represented legitimate security concerns rather than normal relationship conflicts that could be resolved through improved communication or compromise strategy. The professional evaluation of family dynamics through counterintelligence frameworks provided objective validation of behavioral patterns that I had previously questioned or minimized in the interest of family harmony. The enhanced security protocols required for protecting my position included comprehensive monitoring of family communications, legal consultation documentation, and professional contact attempts that could indicate foreign intelligence recruitment efforts or manipulation campaigns. These measures required formal notification to family members about security requirements and potential consequences of continued boundary violations or inappropriate contact with my professional associates. The notification process involved direct communication from security personnel to my parents and Marcus explaining the national security implications of their recent reconciliation attempts and the legal consequences that could result from continued interference with classified government activities or attempts to compromise economic policy development through personal relation manipulation. Special Agent Torres personally contacted Robert and Linda Hartwell to explain the security requirements that governed interactions with their daughter and the documentation obligations that applied to all family communications during my tenure in classified government service. This communication established clear expectations while providing specific information about the legal framework that protected classified economic policy activities from foreign influence operations. Hartwell, your daughter's position within the National Security Council requires enhanced security protection due to foreign intelligence threats targeting American economic policy development. Any attempts to pressure, manipulate, or compromise her professional responsibilities through family relationship dynamics will be considered potential security violations and may result in federal investigation and legal consequences. The security notification also included Marcus and Stephanie, who received direct communication about the national security implications of their unannounced visit to my residence and their attempts to involve my professional associates in family reconciliation. The formal documentation of these activities within counterintelligence frameworks demonstrated the extent to which family manipulation tactics had escalated beyond personal relationship conflicts to potential security violation. The immediate response from my family to the security notification revealed both shock at the scope of my professional responsibilities and continued commitment to manipulation tactics, despite clear warnings about legal consequences and national security implications. Linda Hartwell contacted Agent Torres directly to express outrage about what she characterized as government interference in family relationships and excessive security measures that prevented normal communication between parents and their adult daughter. Agent Torres, I cannot believe that the government is preventing normal family communication and treating loving parents as security threats simply because we want to repair relationships with our daughter. These restrictions are unreasonable and suggest that Victoria has provided misleading information about family conflicts that could have been resolved through normal conversation and mutual respect. Linda's response to the security notification demonstrated fundamental misunderstanding about the national security framework that governed my position, while revealing continued commitment to manipulation tactics that characterized legitimate boundary setting as government interference rather than appropriate professional protection measure. Her willingness to contact security personnel directly suggested persistent refusal to accept the consequences of escalating family pressure campaign. Agent Torres documented Linda's contact attempt and provided additional guidance about the security implications of continued family pressure tactics and their potential classification as foreign influence vulnerability factors that could compromise economic policy protection measures. The professional assessment reinforced the appropriateness of enhanced security protocols while establishing clear consequences for continued manipulation attempts. Robert Hartwell's response involved consultation with legal counsel about potential strategies for challenging what he characterized as excessive government restrictions on family communication rights. This legal consultation represented escalation of manipulation tactics that demonstrated complete disregard for national security requirements and continued commitment to prioritizing family convenience over professional responsibilities and security compliance. The legal consultation also revealed Robert's fundamental misunderstanding about the voluntary nature of my government service and the security requirements that I had willingly accepted as conditions of employment in classified positions. His attempt to frame security protocols as government overreach suggested continued belief that family relationships should supersede professional obligations and national security consideration. Marcus and Stephanie's response involved attempts to contact media organizations to generate publicity about what they characterized as government interference in family relationships and excessive security measures that prevented normal communication between family members. These media contact attempts represented potential security violations that required immediate counterintelligence assessment and protective response measures. The media outreach efforts demonstrated that Marcus and Stephanie remained fundamentally committed to manipulation tactics while lacking understanding about the security implications of their actions and the potential legal consequences of attempting to compromise classified government activities through publicity campaigns designed to pressure policy personnel through public embarrassment. Agent Torres immediately implemented enhanced protective measures that included media monitoring, communication interception, and a legal consultation documentation to prevent potential compromise of economic policy activities through family manipulation campaigns that had escalated to include media pressure tactics and public relations strategies designed to influence my professional decision-making. The security enhancement process also included elevation of my professional responsibilities to include direct participation in counterintelligence briefings and threat assessment activities that informed protective measures for senior economic policy personnel. This assignment positioned me among the most protected government officials while providing access to intelligence resources and security support that enabled continued professional effectiveness despite escalating family pressure campaigns. Jennifer Walsh assigned me to serve as senior policy advisor for a classified economic security initiative that would coordinate protective measures for government personnel involved in sensitive trade policy development and international economic intelligence activity. This appointment required additional security clearances and positioned me for direct involvement in protecting American economic policy from foreign influence operations. The new assignment included regular briefings with counterintelligence officials, security service coordination, and policy development activities that integrated economic analysis with national security protection measures. The scope of responsibilities extended far beyond traditional policy consulting to include strategic planning for protecting American economic interests from sophisticated foreign intelligence threats and influence operations. Admiral Patricia Reynolds provided strategic guidance about the intelligence implications of the Economic Security Initiative and its potential impact on international cooperation agreements and diplomatic relationship management. Her perspective demonstrated the sophisticated integration of economic policy protection with broader national security objectives and intelligence coordination activities. Sterling, your role in coordinating economic security protective measures represents critical enhancement of our capabilities for defending American economic policy from foreign influence operations. The analytical expertise and security awareness you have demonstrated through managing personal relationship vulnerabilities provide exactly the combination of skills needed for effective counterintelligence coordination and policy protection activity. Admiral Reynolds's assessment positioned my family relationship management strategies as evidence of security awareness and counterintelligence capabilities that qualified me for direct participation in protecting American economic policy from foreign threats. The professional validation of boundary-setting decisions provided additional motivation for continued commitment to appropriate relationship management, despite escalating family pressure campaigns. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.